Hi, welcome to another episode of Webcam Sessions. This week we're going to work on my absolute favorite scale. We're going to learn how to play it, how to move it, and we're going to learn why it's my favorite scale and what sort of things I like to use it with. What the scale is called a Mixolydian scale, and it's a type of major scale that introduces something called a flat 7. So if you look at our video from before when we talked about major scales, if you check down in the description below you can see a link to, it's going to be very similar to this scale with just a slight difference in terms of its flavor and sound. So let's go and grab our ukuleles and let's learn how to play this. First thing we're going to do is play just our open C string. This is a C note. The next thing we're going to do is play a D note, which will be our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the C string. Then we'll play an E note, which will be open on the E string. Then an F note, which will be 1 on the E with our index finger. Then a G note, which will be 3 on the E with our ring finger. Then an A note, open on the A string. B note, but instead of it being a normal B, like we would in a major scale, it's going to be a B flat note, which will be fret 1 on the A string. And then a C note again, which will be fret 3 on the A with our ring finger. So essentially what it is on the C string 0 and 2, on the E string 0, 1, 3, and on the A string 0, 1, 3 as well. Pretty cool, right? Now what's really fun about this is much like a lot of other scales that we've played and will continue to work on, this uses something called the 1 finger per fret rule. So we just put our index finger on fret 1, middle on fret 2, ring on fret 3, and pinky on fret 4, which we don't play here. But anytime fret 1 is played, we use our index finger. Anytime fret 2 is played, we use our middle. Anytime fret 3 is played, we use our ring, and that can give us a very concise way of playing it in terms of building up speed and efficiency. So very cool. So that's our C Mixolydian scale, and it's called a C Mixolydian scale because we're starting on a C note. So taking the same pattern, if we wanted to move to, say, a D Mixolydian scale, all that we have to do is find a D note on our C string, and then add the total pattern numbers to whatever that is. So let's go ahead and look at a D note. So if a C note is open on the C string, a D note will be right here on fret 2 of that C string. So we take that number 2 and we add it to our scale in terms of we have 0, 2, 0, 1, 3, 0, 1, 3. If we add the number 2 to it, we get our D Mixolydian scale, which will be 2, 4, 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5. So again, that was 2, 4, 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5. Now the fingering changes a little bit here too because I don't have open strings anymore. I now have to use my index finger where the open strings were, which means on fret 2 I will use my index finger. On 4 I'll use my ring. On 3 I'll use my middle. And on 5 I'll use my pinky, right? So as I go through this, I go 2, 4, 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5. I have 1 finger per fret taking each of their responsibilities. So now I can move this anywhere and do the same exercise. What if I want to play a G Mixolydian? Well, I find my G note, which is here at 7, and play the exact same pattern. So kind of cool. That gives you essentially 12 different Mixolydian scales to work on because you can do it on your C, C sharp, D flat, D, D sharp, E flat, E, so on and so forth, all the way up to 11 before it restarts again at 12. So a lot of scales to be able to work on there. Now a Mixolydian scale, as I mentioned before, essentially has a flat 7, and that's what makes it different from a normal major scale. Now this flat 7 makes it a little less tense of a scale. If you listen to it, there's no real tension and resolution like a normal major scale. You can hear the last note and the second to last note create this identity, right? It creates this tension and resolution, and the Mixolydian kind of lacks that, right? And that's what makes it special. It's why it's used a lot in blues music, for instance. When you listen to a harmonica solo, usually that harmonica will be playing in a Mixolydian mode instead of like a standard major mode. So a Mixolydian scale tends to be used over what we call a dominant 7 chord, which would just be like a C7 chord or a G7 or A7. you'd use the Mixolydian scale that chord is named after to play with it, and it'll sound really good. So if you're playing in a blues and it's an A7 chord, you can play an A Mixolydian scale and it will work. If it's a D7 chord, you play a D Mixolydian scale. It's a very cool scale to be able to create that kind of bluesy sound. It's also used in a lot of different styles of music. One of my favorite songs that uses the Mixolydian mode is called Norwegian Wood by the Beatles. Really, really great sound with that flat 7. A lot of times it's also tied to kind of medieval sounding music. I think that's because it might have been used more with that interval in those times. But all that's great, but I want to talk to you about why I love this scale. It has nothing to do with it being a Mixolydian scale, funny enough, and everything to do with the opportunity to play in a different key using this scale. So we just learned our C Mixolydian scale down here. Now, there's one note in there that's not natural. We've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, and C. Well, the key of C major has no sharps or flats. Key of C Mixolydian, however, will have that one flat being B flat. But there's another key that only has one flat. In fact, there are 5 other keys, 6 other keys. And the one that I'm going to talk about right now is the key of F. The key of F is F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, back to F. So if I'm playing in the key of F major and I want a solo, I can play my F major scale, which will be up here. Again, based on the video that we worked on before, playing an F major scale is something that's doable. But I'm not using any open strings when I'm doing that. Playing the scale up here doesn't help me when I'm playing around this F chord, right? Well, because the C Mixolydian scale and the F major scale share the exact same notes, they can work together as long as you focus on what creates the identity of whichever one you're trying to focus on. So in the case of C Mixolydian, it's all about the C, right? But in the case of F major, it's all about the F. So if I play my C Mixolydian scale, but maybe I go all the way through it, and when I'm descending, I stop on the F, you can hear how it starts to sound more like the key of F than C Mixolydian. It has that sort of tension and resolution. Go ahead and listen to this. Right? What if I go down and back up into the F? You can really hear how now it's starting to sound not quite like that C Mixolydian, but like F. And the reason is again, they share the same notes, but what creates this perspective is sort of where you start and more importantly, where you end. So by ending on the F note, I create that sound of F major. So if I were soloing or trying to make a melody or something in the key of F, instead of using my F major scale, I might actually use my C Mixolydian and just focus on that F note. So here's me just noodling a little bit with the C Mixolydian and ending a lot with the F to create the identity. Again, whenever I end on that F and hold it, it really makes it more powerful. You can really hear that by ending on that F, I can create a really, really nice sound. So I'm going to show you a little lick that I really, really like that uses a hammer-on to create a sound that's just really cool, right? So let's say that we're playing in the key of F and someone says, hey, take a solo. One of my favorite things to do when taking a solo is really simple. It only incorporates a couple notes, and it's this. Really cool, right? All that is I'm going to hold my first fret on the E string for that F note with my index finger. I'm then going to play the open C. I'm going to hammer on to the D note, the second fret, with my middle finger. Now, if you're having trouble with the hammer-on, remember that you want to make sure that hammer-ons are very articulate in terms of the positioning of the finger. You want to make sure that it's literally like a little hammerhead going on. And if you struggle with hammer-ons, be sure to check out the earlier episode of Webcam Sessions that we did on embellishments, just like the hammer-on, to get some more feedback with that. But after doing that hammer-on, I just play the E string, 1 on the E. So I play open C, hammer on to 2, then 1 on E. Really cool sound, right? So what you'll notice here is as I'm playing this, by having that 1 on the E string, that's basically starting to create an F chord, right? So if someone's playing an F chord and I want to jam with it, I might just go to create that sound, and then if I want to expand on it, maybe I play the scale. end on the F note, whether it be on the ascent or on the descent. It doesn't really matter. As long as I end on that F note, I can create that identity of the key of F. So now using the combination here, what we can do is I can play my F major scale, again based on that earlier lesson that we worked on, but I can also play my C Mixolydian in the key of F to create a different sound. And this starts to go down the rabbit hole that's called modes, and we're going to work more with different modes and scales. But essentially, every scale that we play has a starting and ending note. But there's going to be 7 unique notes in that scale that we're playing, if it's what we call a naturally occurring scale. And depending on which note I start and end on, creates a different mode. So that's where you might have heard of phrases like major or minor, which are 2 different modes. But there's also Dorian and Phrygian and Lydian, Mixolydian, which we just did, and Locrian is the other one, right? And so that's a bunch of mumbo jumbo that's just trying to say, hey, every scale we can start on a different note, and that creates a different type of sound. But as ukulele players, with the limited range that we have, sometimes it's really nice to use the relative modes. And what relative means is it shares the same notes and use them out of context because of the notes that they share. Just like the C Mixolydian scale can be so nice for the key of F. Now I know this is some confusing concepts. There's a lot of information here, and music theory and modes can be very stressful. It's like math or something else. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to comment below with them. It is a tricky concept, but if nothing else, just try playing that C Mixolydian scale. Try focusing on the F to make it sound a little bit more like the key of F if you'd like, and see what sort of sounds you can create. I'll see you guys next week for another episode of Webcam Sessions. Be sure to check out the sale that we're currently having on the course that I did with Ukulele Underground, the Ultimate Ukulele Strumming Course. If you haven't checked it out already, it's linked below, and have a great week.